ครับผมชื่อแดนนะครับผมเป็นนักธุรกิจและนักเขียนผมอยู่ซานฟรานซิสโกแคลิฟอร์เนียนะครับผมทำงานกับหลายบริษัท organization อยู่สหรัฐแล้วก็ทั่วโลกนะครับ and I really wanted to make a special thank you where is คุณสุริวัลครับคุณมาครับคุณคุลเวกครับคุณมาครับคุณพาสานครับคุณมาครับ I really and ทุกคนครับคุณมาครับ I really appreciate your inviting me to come and share some of my ideas with you today. We're going to be talking about purpose, and we're going to be talking about culture. I know that I am a Farang. I know that I'm from the United States. I know that I am in Muang Thai. I have a little bit of history with Thailand. I have a little bit of an understanding of culture. From a business perspective, I have a lot of understanding with working with senior executives at large organizations around the world. And increasingly over the last couple of years, I'm having more and more experience working with the people, all of you, people who are directors and members of boards. So what I want to share with you today is I want to share with you a story that I think is relevant for all members of boards. We're going to weave this story together today, composed of 3 different strands. We're going to weave 3 different stories together, all of us, to create a new vision for something that I think is increasingly important for you as members of the board. The first thread we're going to talk about is culture. We're going to bring that thread in. The second thread we're going to talk about is vision. And what I mean by vision is how do we actually see the world around us with our eyes. And then the third thread we're going to talk about is family. And I'll tell you why as we reach the end of this. We're going to take these 3 threads and we're going to weave them together to tell a little bit of a story. Now, I want to make a promise to you. Actually, 3 promises. You have asked me to come and share something with you, and I think it is my obligation to make sure that I give you some real value. You're all very, very busy people. I appreciate the time you've given me. 3 promises I want to make with you today. And as we go through the next hour or so, I would like you to monitor, am I living up to these promises that I make to you? So the first promise is, you will today see a new imperative for directors and members of boards. You will see a new imperative, a new mandate that we are seeing in the United States becoming increasingly important, and I am convinced this mandate is equally important here in Thailand. The second promise is you will see why culture, and we'll talk a lot about what I mean by culture, but why culture matters now more than ever, in particular for you. And the third is I'm going to show you a new toolkit for thinking about culture as a member of a board or as a director, and then being able to convey your thinking to the management of the organization that you represent, and in fact, to all of the employees of that organization. So we're going to talk about those 3 promises today. Thread number 1, I want to talk about culture, and in particular, business culture. Very quickly, here is my understanding of the history of the board. Here is what the board is supposed to do. Back from the beginning of time, the real job of the board is to make sure that the organization doesn't die. The job of the board is to be mindful, to keep the body of the organization alive. So back in the old days, when boards were first invented, the first thing that was considered that could go wrong with a business is its finance. And so it became very, very important that the members of the board have control and guidance over finance. Then it became important to understand that aside from money, it's very important that the organization be well governed. So now the role of the board becomes not only financial, but also to establish good governance. About, say, 15, 20 years ago, it dawned on people in the board that just having good governance and having good finance is not enough, because a business is like a living organism. It's very important that you have a kind of a balanced approach. So now the board starts to become responsible for things like the balanced scorecard, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. The balanced scorecard says the board is responsible not only for making sure that the money is good, that the organization is well governed, but that people in the organization are actually performing well. Are they happy to work here? Are our customers happy? Are our employees happy? That becomes a mandate of the board as well. Then, starting really probably 7 or 8 years ago around the world, the board now becomes very, very concerned. What's the next thing that could kill my business? Digital disruption. In particular, things around cybersecurity. For the first time in the history of the board, it started about 5 years ago, I know all of you know of this, the board members, you become very concerned about cybersecurity in your business, because what's the one thing that could bring down your organization tomorrow? It's not the money. You have control over the money. You know the money's okay. The governance is not going to destroy your business tomorrow. Tomorrow, your business could die because you get hacked. All of a sudden, all of your information is available around the world. Digital disruption, cybersecurity. So all of a sudden, as board members, you have so many things that you need to be responsible for, and now you've got this one to worry about too. But I believe there's one more step in this journey. This picture shows the past. There is actually another element. You think you're busy now? You're going to get even busier. What is this next element that you are about to inherit to become a part of what you need to be concerned about in running the company? That is culture. We're going to talk. I really appreciated the fact that Kun Veritai from BOT gave a little introduction talking about some business culture issues that we've seen. I want to share with you 3 stories from the last couple of years from major organizations around the world that emphasize why culture is so important right now. We're going to talk first about Microsoft, a company with which I've done a lot of work. We're going to talk about Boeing, a company with which I've done a little bit of work. And then we're going to talk about Orange, otherwise known as France Telecom. I've never worked with them, but my wife is French, and I've used Orange services in the past. Microsoft. 10 years ago, Microsoft was at the top of the game. Everybody made money. Microsoft made money by selling all of us software. The business model of Microsoft 10 years ago was to create a piece of software, sell it to you in a box, and you would pay a certain amount of money for that piece of software. That was the old world. Right around the time that CEO Satya Nadella came in, all of a sudden the cloud enters the technology landscape. You no longer make money by selling software. You make money by having the software kind of freely available for businesses. If you're Microsoft, how do you survive? Many business analysts predicted about 10 years ago that Microsoft was about to die. But it did not die. And over the last 4 years, Microsoft, in fact, has reestablished itself, to the surprise of everyone, as the world's most valuable company, beating even Apple. How did this happen? The shift from being a software-selling company to a cloud-based company required a massive cultural shift. In 4 years, Microsoft was able to change the culture of 40,000 of its employees. Their jobs completely changed. These were people that in the past were salespeople or customer service representatives selling discrete units of software. All of them have to learn an entirely new culture of how do I now sell a recurring revenue stream like rented software out of the cloud. There was a great article in The Economist just 2 weeks ago. It said the turnaround at Microsoft required massive change in Microsoft's culture. And it worked. The culture change worked. There are great lessons we can learn. And in fact, in this Economist article, if anybody wants to look it up, it cites a more academic, almost scientific paper on how Microsoft went around doing this cultural change. The board was critical. This was so important to the success of the company that the board is involved for the first time in the culture within the organization. Story number 1. Story number 2, Boeing. Uh-oh. Boeing has a big problem. We all know the story of the 737 MAX, 2 of whom have crashed in Asia, Asia and Africa in the last several months. Multi-$100 billion problem for Boeing. Yes, there is a technological element to the problem. The software that has been put in place is overly complicated, and pilots have not been trained on how to use the software. But only in the last couple of weeks have people within Boeing, the flight test engineers, the test pilots, and the program managers, have come forward and say, the problem at Boeing right now is not a technology problem. It's a culture problem. Because what has happened over the last 15 years is Boeing has shifted from a performance culture where everybody was focused on the performance of the product. Is the product safe? Is the product easy to create? Is it a safe, reliable product? Everyone was focused on that. The culture was built around the product must be safe. Over the last 15 years, they now tell us, people inside the organization, that it's completely changed. Test pilots, in many cases, are no longer invited into technical reviews. Why? And this is from internal documents within Microsoft, published in the New York Times a couple of days ago. The letters are now coming out that what the culture has shifted is from a performance culture to a cost savings culture. As you have done that, we see enormous challenges in how technology is developed, tested, and trained, and we see the outcome. Boeing's problem is a culture problem going in the wrong direction. The last story I want to share with you is quite terrifying, actually. This is an article that also appeared in the New York Times recently about Orange. Orange is the new name of France Telecom. France Telecom is, of course, the largest telecommunications organization in France. It is a state-owned organization. The culture there, here's the problem. Here's the way the story is described. I've only read articles about it. I have no personal knowledge, so I'm just sharing with you what you see in the press. Right now, the chairman of the board, the CEO, and the vice president of human resources are under arrest and in jail in France. Why? Because many years ago, Orange was like a huge state-owned organization that had just a little bit of money above the surface. It was very much in the red. Senior leadership at France Telecom is told, we have to cut costs. We have not effectively made the digital transformation. We're behind. We're losing $500 billion, incredible amount of money. You need to cut costs. Among other things that you need to do, you need to start laying people off. In the French system, you cannot lay people off. The board of France Telecom is in a huge situation right now. What they decided to do in order to lay people off is make the culture so toxic inside the organization that people would voluntarily leave. They're under arrest because in the last 5 years, 35 people who work for France Telecom have committed suicide because the work environment is so toxic. Culture in the worst possible way. Not a very pleasant story. 3 facts I want to think about culture. 3 things to consider right now. Why culture is going to be the most important, one of the most important pieces for you to think about as a board member. Number 1, in the United States, wow, more top executives, managers were fired for bad behavior, bad cultural actions. More were fired for that than for financial non-performance. The management it's about meeting your number, of course, but you better do it well. You better behave well. Number 2, 50% of the jobs that will exist in all of your companies in 5 years do not even exist today. From a cultural perspective, the new people are coming in. The new technologies are coming in. Whose concern is this? Of course, it's management's concern. It's your concern. What will your business look like when half the people who are working there have jobs that you don't even know what they are today? This goes back to our story of Microsoft. How do you intentionally create a culture that is embracing of new skills and technologies that people are bringing in? That was fact number 2. And fact number 3, I'm doing a lot of work with boards these days around exactly this issue because this is something new. In general, in the United States and in Canada, which is where I am doing most of our work and where our research is interviews with board members are saying, I am more anxious about the cultural performance of my company than I am about cybersecurity right now. Because I don't want to be the board member, the chairman, who reads an article that says bad behavior has been taking place at the executive level in my business, and now people are under arrest or are being subpoenaed into court because they behaved badly. Wow. In any rapidly evolving business environment, and this is why I can say I'm tending to skew what I'm sharing you to the United States and Europe because, to be fair, that is the world that I know. But I also know enough about Southeast Asia, and I certainly know enough about Thailand to know that the issues there, the issues here are not that dissimilar. They're very, very similar issues. In a rapidly evolving business environment, which I know you have, three things are very true. Having a purpose-driven culture, and we will talk about what that means, helps to navigate the exponential change that's going on right now. Having a culture that is grounded and resilient helps you navigate through difficult times because you can rely on the culture of your people to help guide you through. A purpose-driven culture promotes innovation and disruption. As scary as that is, especially for boards, you know this far better than I. Disruption is real. Your business is being disrupted, and if it's not now, it's going to be. Having a resilient culture, an adaptive culture, is going to help you navigate that. And then the third, of course, having a purpose-driven culture, a culture that intentionally understands what is the broader purpose of my organization. It's not just to make money. We've heard this today. It is about being environmentally sustainable. It is about being socially engaged. We know these things are true. Having a resilient, purpose-driven culture is going to help you to manage those kinds of risks because you can rely on your people to know what is the purpose that you've set for them. As I was doing the preparation calls for this talk, I was talking to Kun Suriwan and I was talking to Kun Kulvik. And one of the questions we were asking is, Dan, when you talk about culture, do you mean board culture? No. I know, of course, that there's a massive amount of information and very important things that relate to what is the culture of all of you in the room, how do you relate to each other, and how do you relate to management. This is what's new about this mandate. You now have a responsibility that you've never had in the past to help set and influence the culture of the entire organization. It is as important as finance, it's as important as cyber risk, it's as important as disruption that you now have a role in managing and overseeing. This, as you do this, the relationship between you and the executives is also going to evolve. And that's something very important to think about. So how are you going to do this? This is where my group, I think, really is starting to do some interesting work. There's a gentleman named Lorne Rubis. You probably wouldn't know his name, but he's a very, very seasoned executive out of Canada. I've been working with him and another partner for the last year or so. And what Lorne has done is he's developed a series. He's worked with boards. He's been a multi-time CEO and chairman of many boards himself. What he's identified with a tremendous amount of research is that every purpose-driven culture in an organization can be broken down into having 9 elemental components. I'm going to walk you through these very quickly. Because time is limited today, we only have an hour. I'm just going to go through these very fast, but I'd like you to just recognize that we believe there are these 9. I'm going to take you through them very quickly, and I'd like you to just think as you're looking at this list, are there 1 or 2 of these components that you personally feel are very, very important to help evolve and develop the culture of your organization? So very quickly, we could divide the 9 up into 3 different categories. So there are components that are really based on serving the vision and the purpose of your organization. So you have an inspiring purpose and a story behind your business. You have intentional, well-stated values. And you have courage-driven and results-oriented leadership. Those are about how you establish vision. Now, what about emotion? We know this. Culture is nothing more than behavior. Behavior is driven by emotion. It's not driven by what people are told to do. It is, but that usually becomes a fairly toxic culture. The culture is driven by what people are emotionally inspired to do. So how, as a member of a board who now has a role in helping to build a purpose-driven culture, how do you approach the emotional side? 3 important elements. You put people first, and you become obsessed about your customer. Obsessed about your customer. How do we know that customer obsession is a good strategy for business? Who is the wealthiest man on the planet right now? Jeff Bezos. Who is the #1 customer-obsessed company on the planet right now? Amazon. All decisions are made on what is the impact to our customer. Because if our customer is happy, the return on investment for us will just continue to grow. If our customer is not happy, nothing we do is going to make us survive. It is about having a customer. So, and putting the customer first. We must create an environment of psychological safety for the people within our company. And if you were to read the articles, this is exactly what Boeing and certainly what France Telecom Orange has not done. You have to create a culture in which people feel safe to say, I don't think we're doing the right thing, or to have an opinion on what might be a better way to do it. You need to create an environment of psychological safety, and you need to empower your people to be able to share information with each other outside of typical management or outside of the influence of the board. Your job is to help guide and navigate the culture so that the people within the organization, because they know the values, are able to share them with each other so that you don't have to be every place. The company, the culture starts to thrive on its own. And then we have the action-oriented elements. You must have a culture which is driven by growth and a disruptive mindset. It is scary. It is terrifying, but that is also the truth of the world. The way things were in business is not the way things are going to be in business. It's just not. A lot of things are going to be disrupted. You have to be able to embrace that. How do you do that? It's beneficial, there's a lot of research around this, to actually create a culture in your organization that encourages people to experiment, and it literally encourages people to play. Because when people are playing, and in a business sense, when they're trying something new, when people are having a good time because they feel safe in trying something new, the culture blossoms. People are happy, and when they're happy, they are more productive. And how do you, as a member of the board or as a chairman of the board, help to encourage that? The last of these 9 elements is really, really effective listening and encouraging people to talk to you. The way you will find out how things are working in the company is not by talking to the company, but by more effectively listening to what's going on, coming back to you. So these are our 9 elements. Just very quickly, I want to walk you through a case study, very, very fast, that would show how some of these have been used. I mentioned the gentleman named Lorne. Lorne Rubis has been working with myself and my other partner. He's been working at a company called ATB Financial, which is actually one of the largest financial services institutions in Canada. ATB is located in Alberta, Canada, and it is far and away the largest financial institution. It's a bank, it's a credit union, it's a mortgage, it's a financial services organization. It's massive. It represents about, I think, about 1/8 of Canada's entire economy. It's an enormous financial services institution. And what Lorne has been able to do is transform the culture by following these 9 elements over the last few years. And I just want to give you an example. This is public information. I'm not sharing anything that we couldn't share in public. ATB, Alberta Treasury Board, long history, but what has happened is it has a very clear purpose and a story. This is a bank that is relentlessly inventive. It is trying to drive financial happiness deeper. Why? Because it actually cares very much about the financial well-being of every member of that, every citizen of that province. This is its purpose, and there's a great story. We're not going to read it now, but there is a purpose and a story behind this organization that everybody on the board and every senior executive is able to recite. I can tell you the history of this bank and why we are important. The values that come out of that story are so well defined and so well driven that people actually have them painted on their bodies. These are the values, whether it's about trust or whether it's about having fun or whether it's about being big. Normally, when we think about a bank, we don't think about these kind of values. It's really interesting how they're saying, look, people are used to Amazon right now or other online services. People are used to being able to go on their phone and being able to get whatever they want right now. If they can't get that from their bank, that bank is not going to work very well. Intentional values. Results and courage-driven leadership. Let's make no mistake, it is important as the leader to have a sense of courage and to be oriented towards results. There's no doubt about that. Think about being the captain of a ship. You have results that you have to achieve, and in order to make the decisions about moving that ship, you have to be able to be willing to make some courageous decisions. That's your job and the job of management. Because what will then happen, if you put people first and are customer obsessed, conversations become about people and people react well to that. The peer-to-peer power then makes sure that everyone is included and everyone knows how to engage around those values and share what they're experiencing with each other. Create an environment of psychological safety so that that sharing can take place and is encouraged. Then we move into how do you take action. Build this mindset around growth and be willing to be disruptive. The world is changing. We have to embrace that. Be willing to play and experiment. I love this little chart just in terms of a picture. This is something we've been working on that says, imagine a kind of an intersection of what you're really great at doing, what you love to do that gives you value, and where you receive value. At the intersection of all those, that's where we love to play. If people can find that in their work, they're going to make a great culture. And then again, the last of these elements is be truly willing to listen. Really, really willing to listen to what is coming back to you. These are the 9 components. Now, I told you there were 3 strands in the story today. The second strand, the second thread, let's leave culture for a moment and let's talk about vision. When I talk about vision, I actually mean the magic trick, what's happening in your eyes. When I talk about vision, I don't mean a vision statement, a grand vision statement. We're going to get to that. But that is derived from what do you actually see. So myself and my colleagues have spent the last couple of decades understanding how is it that people actually see the world from a neuromechanical and a cognitive perspective. What are your eyes doing as you're looking at me right now? It's pretty remarkable. It's kind of a magic trick. Why is this important? It turns out that more than half of your brain is dedicated to processing vision. If this circle represents your entire brain, all of the hundreds of billions of neurons that you have in your brain, about 1/3 of your brain does nothing but process vision, far and away more than any other single thing that you do. More of your brain is dedicated to processing vision than any other thing that you do. 1/3 of your brain does nothing but process the photons that are coming into your brain and turn light into meaning in the back of your head. 1/3 of your brain processes vision in concert with all of your other sensory inputs, touch and smell and taste, balance. It's combining all of those, which, think about it, leaves about 1/3 of your brain for everything else. Thinking, logic, math, memory, emotions. That's all in a very small, 1/3 of your brain. When I talk about vision, creating visual stories, why? Because that is the way you're going to be able to activate someone's entire brain. When we're just talking, it's great. When we're talking and showing pictures, as I'm trying to do now, it's a completely different experience. It lights up our entire brain, and we really, really understand it. Why does this matter? Because if you can lead people's eyes by showing them an image at the same time that you're talking, their entire brain will follow you. I can give you an example. I could say, look over here. Isn't this interesting? No, now I want you to look over here. This is actually more interesting. And the path from here to here. No, this is the one I want you to look at over here. How do we move from here? The more that I give your eyes something to do, the more I capture and in fact almost own the rest of your visual, of your thinking process. If I capture what you see, you will stay with me as long as I keep giving your mind something to do because I've activated the entire brain now. People want a vision. People want to be able to see what it is that you're telling them. As a board member, as a leader, especially in this new world where you have a role in influencing culture, people are looking to you to create that picture. No one else is going to do it. It's up to you. One of the greatest vision statements ever, I believe, certainly my favorite, was when President Kennedy in the United States, way back in 1961, said to everyone in America and many people around the world, I give us a challenge. Let's go to the moon, and let's make sure that we do it in the next 9 years. And we will turn over everything. We will do whatever it takes to get to the moon. Talk about one of the most beautiful vision statements ever, because every one of us could go outside at night and look up in the sky and say, I know what we're doing. We're going there. Wow. And I think this is a beautiful image to show because this was 50 years ago on the 20th of July that finally, because President Kennedy said so, established that vision for the country and in many ways for the world. 50 years ago to the day, that people set foot on the moon because of that vision. It's amazing. How many of you remember that time? Does anybody here remember that time? Some of you were around? This is a crazy story. I'm going to run out of time, and Kun Siriwan is going to want to kill me because I'm going to take time into our lunch. I'm a pilot. I love airplanes. Both my parents were pilots. I learned how to fly when I was just a kid. I still fly a little bit now, just a small plane. So I subscribed to an aviation magazine. Just on the day, I live in San Francisco. On the morning that I was about to get on my flight to fly here for this presentation, I got my aviation magazine. And this particular issue was an anniversary of the 50th year of the landing on the moon. There was an article in that magazine, I couldn't believe it, about a Thai girl and a Thai boy when Neil Armstrong and the rest of the Apollo 11 crew, after they landed on a moon, went on a world tour. This Thai boy and this Thai girl, who were just kids at that time, knew that Neil Armstrong was staying at the Erawan Hotel. I never knew this story. This was in the magazine. They broke into the Erawan Hotel, went to his room, and knocked on the door in order to get him to sign the photo that they had. I promise you, I will get the name of the article because the boy became one of the most nationally recognized film directors in Thailand. I don't know his name, but I will look it up for you. And to this day, if you go into his office, he doesn't have a photo of all the awards that he's won. He has the photo signed by Neil Armstrong. Anyway, total digression. The power of a vision statement. What did JFK, what did John F. Kennedy actually do? The vision, he said, is, I'm going to create a destination. Where are we going? Then I'm going to tell us about the journey to get there. And it's going to be a challenging journey. And our purpose. Why go to the moon? JFK said it. We don't go to the moon because it's easy. We go to the moon because it is hard. It is the purpose of doing something difficult that will make us come together to achieve something that individually cannot be done. Whether you tell a story or wave your arms or draw a picture, if you want people to follow, if you want management to follow what you're proposing, if you want members of the company to follow what you're proposing, you have to show people where you want to take them. And the best way to do that is to have a picture. I'm going to give you a quick example, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of an exercise with me. Is there anybody in the room who likes to drink coffee? Is there anybody in here who is a coffee drinker? Okay, many people are coffee drinkers. You've probably heard of a company called Starbucks. Has anyone ever heard of a company called Starbucks? No, never heard of Starbucks. Okay. Starbucks, as I'm sure you know, is the largest chain of cafes on the planet. Does anybody know how many stores Starbucks has around the world? Does anyone want to guess how many? I'll show you how many they have. They have 27,000 stores around the world. We're not going to talk about Starbucks. We're going to talk about a company called Peet's Coffee. Peet's is the number 2 coffee retailer in the world in terms of number of stores and coffee sold. Starbucks has 27,000 stores. Peet's has 250 stores. The difference between number 1 and number 2 in the coffee retail industry is 2 orders of magnitude. Peet's was a publicly traded company. This is the CEO and chairman of the board of Peet's Coffee. He became a friend of mine, Pat O'Day. Pat had a problem. It's a publicly traded company. His shareholders are coming to him and saying, if Starbucks is this big, and we do the same thing as Starbucks, and we're only this big, clearly there's room to grow. The problem Pat faces, Peet's Coffee came first. Peet's Coffee was the original high-quality coffee retail chain in the United States. The founders of Starbucks started at Peet's Coffee. This is the truth. For the first 7 years that Starbucks existed, it bought all of its coffee from Peet's. Why is this important for our story? Peet's Coffee has been around since 1967. From people who know Peet's Coffee, it is the best coffee in the world. Those are the people who are truly dedicated to Peet's Coffee. If Pat O'Day comes in and starts undermining the quality in order to become a cost-driven culture, perhaps like Boeing seems to be now, the very people who love his product are going to leave. They will reject him. So here's what Pat did. I want to talk about coffee. Dan, can we create a vision picture that I can share with anyone that says, what is the strategy of Peet's Coffee? And we did, and I want to walk you through it. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And we drew it on a napkin. It's a coffee company. They have a lot of napkins. We printed this strategy on every napkin for 2 years. So whenever you bought a cup of coffee from Peet's, the strategy of the company was on there in the form of a picture. Everybody's seeing the vision. And here's what it was, just to show you. The vision of Peet's Coffee is to be the gold standard of coffee, the best cup of coffee in the world, and nothing is ever going to change that. In order to do that, the mission of the company, agreed to by the board, emphasized by the board, is, okay, our mission is to build the biggest base of people we can who love what we mean by quality. We will never be as big as Starbucks. We don't have to. We just need the biggest base of people who believe in what we mean by quality. In order to do that, operationally, now it shifts away from the board and it shifts over to management, how are we going to structure our company strategically in order to achieve that mission? What we're going to do is we're going to reorganize the business into 4 different operating groups. One of those groups is going to be called the Serve Group. These are the people who actually serve your coffee. When you go in to buy a Peet's Coffee, these are the people that are the baristas. These are the people that are making the coffee for you. And they have a very specific mindset and a very specific culture about how they make their coffee and how they talk to you and share it with you and engage with you customer first around that cup of coffee. The second group is called the Manage Group. These are the people that run the stores. These are the people who are responsible for the daily, the quarterly returns, the results, the profitability of each one of the stores. They don't serve you coffee. They are managing the store. Very different culture, but again, focused on many of the same elements. The third group is called the Develop Group, really human resources and training, whose job is to make sure that these people know exactly what to do to fit in to make this mission successful. And then the last group, this would be you. This was all the senior executives, all the members of the board. You're called the Inspire Group. Your job is to inspire everyone else on this piece of paper with what is the culture, what is the mission of, what is the purpose of what we're trying to do. You're the inspiration. Underneath that, there is a set of tools and metrics, guidance, training materials, measures, criteria by which you will be judged, that says how well are you doing the part of the job on this picture that you're there to do, so that everybody isn't just told do this, but is now given tools to know how to do it. I tell you this story because using this napkin strategy and also being a very, very good executive and a good chairman, Pat was able to sell the company, which had always been the plan, because Peet's Coffee wasn't big enough as a publicly traded company to do what it needed to do to compete with Starbucks. So much of the strategy here was to have an exit, to go back into private equity. So what happened is a very secretive German company called JAB Investments actually bought Peet's Coffee for almost $1 billion US, which was highly over the actual trading share price of Peet's Coffee. Was the chairman pleased? The chairman was delighted. Was the board pleased? Absolutely. Were the employees pleased? Yes, because the culture was not impacted by the purchase. Now, just on a side note, there was just an article also in The Economist 2 weeks ago about JAB Holdings. They're now the second biggest retailer of coffee on the planet because they bought a whole bunch of other coffee retailers as well. So it's something interesting. If any of you are in the food services side, I know some of you are. If any of you are in the coffee side, it might be interesting to look at JAB Holdings because they're making an enormous global play to try to begin to corner part of the coffee retail market. This is not secret information. This is just coming out of The Economist. Okay, the last thread in our story. Remember we had 2. We talked about culture Then we talked about vision and sight. The last one is I want to talk about family. And the reason I want to talk about family is because culture, especially corporate culture, business culture, it's too big a word for us to even really think about in the short time that we have. So with Kun Kolvik, we were thinking, what might be a really good way to have all of us just think, what does culture really mean? And we thought, well, every one of us works for an organization that we have a direct role in defining the culture of. And I'm not talking about your business, I'm talking about your family. If you think about where you have cultural impact every single day, it's with your family, the most important organization that you work with and are a member of. So we thought, wouldn't it be interesting, just as an example, to think about how culture feels, for each of us to think for a moment about what is my culture at my family? And what do I know from how my family works that I might be able to apply in my role as a member of the board? This is my family. This is myself, my wife Isabel, my two daughters Sophie and Celeste. In fact, this was in Yukongtep 2 ปีที่แล้วนะครับ you Paragon, Siam Paragon, I think. So I come to Thailand fairly often. My family, it was the first time that my daughters had been here. Yes, I know this is not Thai food, but they really loved Thai food. So this is my family. Now, ผมเป็นนักเรียนแลกเปลี่ยนนะครับ AFS นะครับ38 ปีที่แล้วอยู่จังหวัดนนทบุรีนะครับอยู่บางบัวทองผมมีครอบครัวคนไทยนะครับ This is my Thai family today. I originally met my Thai family in 1981. You can imagine I come from Montana in the United States. A lot of cows and horses. เราไม่พูดภาษาไทยอยู่มอนทานานะครับครอบครัวของคนไทยของผมไม่ได้พูดภาษาอังกฤษ So I arrive here, I have a new family. Talk about a culture shock, but we came to really, really love each other. We drew all the time. That was the way we communicated. If any of you have a chance to attend, I'm doing a bit of a workshop later on tomorrow. I don't know, couldn't consider one if I'm getting in trouble by saying that, but one of the things we're going to talk about is how do you draw pictures when you're trying to communicate with someone when you don't even have the same language, and it's beautiful. So what I want you to think about for a moment, I want everyone to take a sheet of paper. You should all have a piece of paper on your chair. And I want you to think about your family. Not mine, not hers, not his, yours. And seriously, on that piece of paper, this is going to seem really weird, but I really want you to do this with me. On that sheet of paper, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I want you to draw a picture of your family. Let me show you exactly what I mean. I want you to do something like this. I'll do mine as an example, and then I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. And I want 100% participation because we're building a very psychologically safe culture in here. So I'm going to tell you what to do. And I will listen if you don't want to, but I want you to do this. This is very important. It's just as a simple exercise to think about culture, what it really matters. So, for example, I would say, here's me, and I have my wife Isabel, and I have my daughter Sophie, and I have my daughter Celeste, and of course I have Kumpa, who lives over in Florida, and Isabel has her mother, who's over in France, and I have my brothers. So draw a little picture like that. I want you to do it. Try to limit yourself to about 10 people, because one of the things I know from living in Thailand is that your family could take a lot of pieces of paper. So try to limit yourself to maybe 10 people. No one else is going to have to see this. If you don't include someone, that's okay. I won't share it. So what I want you to do on your sheet of paper, seriously, just like I've done here, don't be afraid. Please draw a picture of your family. I give you 2 minutes. Go. Okay, about 1 minute to go. Thirty seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, stop. We're not quite done yet. Remember the 9 elements. I want you to just look over this. I would like you to pick one element that you think your family has done really well from a cultural perspective. One of these elements that you think your family consistently is really good at. In the culture of your family, what is one of these elements that you are very proud of? And I want you to write that element down on your sheet of paper. So I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to do that. Maybe, no, I'm not going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 1 minute. I want you to look over this list. Which, as you define the culture of your family, which one of these? Okay, just take about 10 more seconds and come up with one and write it down on your family. My family is very good at psychological safety, or my family is very good at courage and results-driven leadership, whatever it is. Please raise your hand when you have identified a cultural component that you think your family is good at. I want to see a lot of hands coming up now. I'm going to wait for most hands to come up. There's no right or wrong here. I want you to really feel, and hey, let's try something else. If there's an element of your family culture that isn't on this list, write that down. We can be innovative and disruptive, right here. Okay, I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Each of you, I want you to find one person sitting next to you. Form teams of 2 people. In 2 minutes, 1 minute each, I'm going to start the clock. The first person, I want you to take that picture and show it to your colleague and say, this is a drawing of my family. And this is what I'm very proud of in the culture of our family. Pasa Thai ko dai, huh? Lao, then you shift it over and let the other person share back with you for another minute. Do you all understand what I'm asking you to do? It's going to get really noisy in here, and we're going to have a lot of people showing pictures. That's good. Psychological safety. Okay, start the clock. Go. You should switch now. 1 minute's passed. If you haven't switched, now's the time to switch. Okay, 10 seconds to go. Finish sharing your pictures, sharing your family. Okay, I want everyone to stop. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause because look what incredible visual culture purpose executives you are. You're really good at this. Now your homework. Yes. Your homework over the next week, over the next month, over the next year is to do exactly the same thing for the business on which you are on the board. What does my business look like? What is the culture that is important to make sure that it lasts? And I share one more quote with you, one more idea. We're going to go back to probably one of the great chairmen of the board and executives, certainly of the last 100 years, Jack Welch from GE. Anybody here ever work for GE? Did anybody ever do some work with GE? Usually you find someone who's done some work with GE. Pretty powerful company. In the 20 years that Jack Welch was the CEO and chairman of the board of GE, he raised its value, its market value, by 4,000%. GE has trouble today, there's no doubt about it, but the lesson is still true. Good business leaders, that's you, create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. I want to thank you so much for your time. ขอบคุณครับ. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your heartfelt speech, which opened us the new horizon. Give a big round of applause for Mr. Dan Rome once more. Well, apart from talking with our wordings, now we talk with heart as well. Thank you very much. We all do appreciate that. Open a new horizon for communications นะครับ และลำดับถัดไป now I would like to open the sessions for questions from the floor. Should you have any questions, you can ask our speaker, Kun Dan Rome, who will be here together with us for another, I guess, 10 minutes approximately. ถ้าเกิดว่าท่านใดมีคำถามยกมือมานะฮะเดี๋ยวมีไมโครโฟนวิ่งไหมต้องมีนะเดี๋ยวหนุ่มคนนี้จะเป็นคนวิ่งไมโครโฟนไปนะฮะ questions. Oh, it seems that it has been very clear.
So, yes, indeed. Well, I have a question for everybody, if I may. Raise your hand. Did what I just share with you, did it make sense? Yeah? Raise your hand if you thought that made sense, please. Thank you. I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. This is the first time I've ever given that speech. This is a new part of my business, is this idea of being able to take our lessons and focus on you, members of the board, because we see an incredible opportunity and an incredible challenge for all the reasons that we described here around culture. So I want to just test, you were my prototype. So do you think it will fly? Yeah? Good. Okay.
I think 10 years ago, we heard the word re-engineering.
Yes.
But now I think it's disruptive. Disappear. Nobody talk about it. Can you give a few words about?
Sure. So for the question was, 10 years ago, the next trend was about re-engineering. And we don't hear about that anymore. I think maybe what you're also asking is the same true of culture? Absolutely not. Re-engineering was a fancy term in many ways for talking about right-sizing or downsizing the business. I'm not an expert in reengineering, but my understanding of reengineering really as a concept is it entered at a time when market forces were pushing businesses down. And the only way to survive would be to drive cost out of your business. And so what we talk about is re-engineering the business in order to be able to execute by spending less money. That started probably re-engineering the first time I became aware of it, and I'm sure there are people here, business school people, who know better than I. My understanding of the term re-engineering is it probably really started right around the time of, well, two coinciding crises at the same time. So Asian economic crisis of about 1997 and the dot-com bubble bursting in the United States around 1999 had a huge impact around the world in all kinds of businesses. So the idea came, what's a nice way to describe resizing our business down? Luckily, for most businesses, we recovered. Things started to pick up, and nobody talks about re-engineering now because we don't need to. Because now it's about how do we develop a growth mindset and how do we take advantage or think about disruption. Does that seem like a good answer? Is that what you were after? Let me add one more point then, since you brought it up, sir, is will the same thing happen with culture? I ask you. Is culture just a word that we're going to hear about for the next 5 years and then forget? Every business, we say it, but we need to mean it. Every business is about the people that work there and the customers that receive a benefit from it. And again, back to Kun Veritai talking about a business needing to be more sustainable and more about societal impact. I think culture is not going away.
Well, thank you. We have the lady in red holding a microphone.
Thank you.
Please.
Right. I'm Pim Chia. Would like to ask the question about, apart from the culture, do you have any advice for the generation gap?
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
That's the question, isn't it? I have no advice. I have 2 daughters. You saw their photo. I have a generation gap at home. I know many of you when you drew your family. How many people who drew your family, how many of you have children? I imagine many of you do, and I hope you drew them. There's a generation gap. So we do pay a lot of attention, and I do have a lot of business contacts who, in the United States, I can't attest for Thailand because I don't know, but in the United States, we call the millennial arriving in work is a massive cultural shift. A very different work ethic, a very different understanding of what is expected of me. And sometimes we say, oh, these young kids coming into work, they don't work hard. They don't do what we used to do. I think there's another way to say it. It's a challenge for management to understand how do we adapt the culture of our business to be more accepting of the new generation that's coming in that have a different understanding of business because it sounds silly, but they are the future. The future of your business is in the people who are right now 20, 25 years old. So there's no good answer except I think that make sure as you're building your culture, you recognize that the younger people coming in have a different sense of their role in the planet than those of us who are a little bit older, especially around sustainability. Again, I don't know in Thailand, I can't answer, but in the United States, one of the biggest changes as the millennials are coming in is it's very much less about what do I want from work. It's more about what can we do together. We need to take care of the planet. We need to take care of each other. That was not a thing when I was coming into the business world. What do I need? So it's the best question. And I think it's worth thinking about. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And next questions from
Dan, thanks very much for your presentation. But in order to be fair with you, let me ask you in Thai.
Okay.
วัฒนธรรมองค์กรเนี่ยทั้ง9อย่างเนี่ยบางทีมันมีคอน FLICT ด้วยนะครับ
มี conflict ด้วยครับ
เราไม่สามารถที่จะผลักดันไปได้ทุกอย่างพร้อมๆกันเพราะมันจะเกิดปัญหาขึ้นเช่นผมยกตัวอย่างเช่นเรื่อง empowerment ซึ่ง empowerment เนี่ยถ้าเรา empower พนักงานทุกคนในระดับพร้อมกัน
ขอโทษนะครับ I'm lost already. I speak Thai like a 5-year-old ด็ก I speak really good 5-year-old Thai, but beyond that, I'm sorry. Could you try again for me in English?
Okay, what I'm saying is that we can't just implement all these 9 components
Correct.
simultaneously. Some of these can create some conflicts to each other. For example, like empowerment, you could create conflicts in the organization if you're looking for organizational safety.
Yeah.
So in order to implement, you need to be real careful.
You need to be extremely careful. And the good news is, it's a very good question, thank you. Interestingly enough, part of the answer is, it's impossible to implement all 9 of these in any short period of time. It's more a thought model to be able to think about where do we need to begin to focus and prioritize, and also to be aware of the unintended consequences of raising one issue, one cultural component over the other. That said, it is our experience that we're beginning to see that companies that really have an adaptive and resilient culture that is able to take them through the bumps, like Microsoft has proven to do exhibit elements of all 9. How they got there, that's your job. It's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for Ajahn Narong's, I think that will be the last question for
Okay.
this session.
Dan, your culture, sort of philosophy or models, can it be applied to all business or all the countries?
What an excellent question. Thank you. I don't know. I think so. What do you think? Do you think they can, or do you think maybe not?
Maybe not, but again, the next question that I have to ask you, from what you have done some research and come up with this model, do you see anything that you might want to tell us how, if you say it cannot be applied to all, so what are your insights?
What we have tried to do, and thank you again because this is a very, very thoughtful question. What we are trying to do is look as broadly as we can to best practices from successful businesses and say, what have they managed to do from a cultural perspective that is enabling them to be resilient? I fully recognize that almost every business model that's put forward, whether it's Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, Clayton Christensen with Innovator's Dilemma, all of us and all of you probably spend a lot of time trying to think through, is there a model that I can follow that will help me be more successful? And the only way we know if the model works is to try to continue to evolve it. So the real answer is, I don't know. However, the second part of the answer is, if you look at these 9 components, one is missing. There was nothing in the 9 components about compensation. That's something we need to think about. How does compensation impact culture? What am I, as an employee, getting out of it? There are more. This is a working model. But I am very confident that if a company, if you look at each of these components, research is indicating that they are probably close to correct. And I would turn the question back to you. Intuitively, in your gut, when I showed you the list, we had the question, thank you, where something seemed off. I don't want to ask this for everybody, but as you look through that list, how did it feel? Does it feel intuitively correct based on the things that you know that make for successful companies? My answer is it feels pretty good. Granted, a lot of people have made terrible business decisions based on how does it feel, which is why the research side comes in. So I really appreciate your question. My answer is, I think so, but can you help me try it? Can we help and see if that begins to work? Thank you. This is a great question.